funerary medicine. As of latest count, Bicol University has 82 AACUP accredited academic programs with 3 programs accredited at level 4. It is also a level 3 accredited institution whose reputation as the premier university in the Bicol region is rooted in its consistent top-level performance in various licensure examinations, becoming recognized as top-performing school in accountancy, social work, midwifery, nursing, education, and engineering. BU has been given its seal of excellence as CHED recognized Center of Excellence in Teacher Education, Center of Development in Nursing Education Research. Its commitment toward national thrust and directions and in meeting the needs of its community beyond the university borders is reflected in its programs and projects as base agency for Bicol Consortium for Health Research and Development or BCHRD and base agency for Bicol Consortium for Agriculture, Aquatic and Natural Resource Research and Development or BCARD. Over the years, it has earned its place as one of the 22 leading state universities in the Philippines. Bicol University has also been recently rated as 3-star institution by the Quacquarelli Simmons or QS Intelligence Unit, the independent compiler of QS World University Rankings. Bicol University has expanded its linkages to Europe and Southeast Asian universities.
Sige nga.
Check. 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 Opas.
Nagalaw naman. Basta po, nag-open mic lang tayo, sir. Open mic lang po tayo.
Sir, ma'am, nakalive mo po sa video. Pero banner lang po na pinapakita.
Okay lang yan.
Bigay lang daw.
Naglalaog
In the heart of Sanyoki, we have Sanyoki University of Applied Sciences. International, entrepreneurial, best for our students.
For me as a student, it's easy to discuss and ask help from the staff and the teachers. They are very encouraging towards the students, and the spirit of CMP is very international, friendly, and you almost feel like a second home and a place where you can progress as a professional and a student.
Here we have modern facilities and a superb learning environment. But it's not all about our own university. We are focusing on being international in every aspect. We have about 200 partner universities in over 50 countries. We haven't forgotten about research, development, and innovation either. We also provide many kinds of tailored services for companies and organizations where our students can participate in during their studies. We just scratch the surface with what we have to offer. Be curious and explore for more information.
Bicol University, or BU, the premier university in the Bicol region, Philippines, is a SUP Level 4 institution by Department of Budget and Management, or DBM standards, established on June 21, 1969, following the passage of Republic Act 5521. It has 17 colleges spread across its 7 campuses in the provinces of Albay and Sorsogon, with the College of Law and the College of Medicine as its latest addition, and recently the Doctor of Dental Medicine and Doctor of Veterinary Medicine. As of latest count, Bicol University has 82 AACUP accredited academic programs, with 3 programs accredited at level 4. It is also a Level 3 accredited institution whose reputation as the premier university in the Bicol region is rooted in its consistent top-level performance in various licensure examinations, becoming recognized as the top-performing school in accountancy, social work, midwifery, nursing, education, and engineering. BU has been given its seal of excellence as CHED-recognized Center of Excellence in Teacher Education, Center of Development in Nursing Education, Center of Development in Fisheries Education, and Center for Higher Education Research. Its commitment toward national thrust and directions and in meeting the needs of its community beyond the university borders is reflected in its programs and projects as base agency for Bicol Consortium for Health Research and Development, or BCHRD, and base agency for Bicol Consortium for Agriculture, Aquatic, and Natural Resource Research and Development, or BCARD. Over the years, it has earned its place as one of the 22 leading state universities in the Philippines. Bicol University has also been recently rated as 3-star institution by the Quacquarelli-Symonds or QS Intelligence Unit, the independent compiler of QS World University Rankings. Bicol University has expanded its linkages to Europe and Southeast Asian universities. Bicol University or BU, the premier university in the Bicol region, Philippines, is a SUP Level 4 institution by Department of Budget and Management or DBM standards, established on June 21, 1969 following the passage of Republic Act 5521. It has 17 colleges spread across its 7 campuses in the provinces of Albay and Sorsogon, with the College of Law and the College of Medicine as its latest addition, and recently the Doctor of Dental Medicine and Doctor of Veterinary Medicine. As of latest count, Bicol University has 82 AACOP accredited academic programs, with 3 programs accredited at Level 4. It is also a Level 3 accredited institution whose reputation as the premier university in the Bicol region is rooted in its consistent top-level performance in various licensure examinations, becoming recognized as top-performing school in accountancy, social work, midwifery, nursing, education, and engineering. BU has been given its seal of excellence as CHED-recognized Center of Excellence in Teacher Education, Center of Development in Nursing Education, Center of Development in Fisheries Education, and Center for Higher Education Research. Its commitment toward national thrust and directions and in meeting the needs of its community beyond the university borders is reflected in its programs and projects as base agency for Bicol Consortium for Health Research and Development or BCHRD and base agency for Bicol Consortium for Agriculture, Aquatic and Natural Resource Research and Development or BCARD. Over the years, it has earned its place as one of the 22 leading state universities in the Philippines. Bicol University has also been recently rated as 3-star institution by the Quacquarelli-Symonds or QS Intelligence Unit, the independent compiler of QS World University Rankings. Bicol University has expanded its linkages to Europe and Southeast Asian universities. This is Bicol University.
Kahit saan nang mapunta, galing mo ay ipapamana. Unay kay tanda, piyuin nyo.
Kahit lubukin man ang panahon, sabay-sabay pa rin tayong aahon. Tayong kailanman hindi nawawala, pagmamahal natin sa isa't isa.
Piyuin nyo, halina't sumabay sa tutugin ng ating tagumpay. So'y nagniningning ng biyuin ng magaling. Ikaw at ako, biyuin na tayo. Panahon, oras ay lumilipas lumilipas, galing ng liwenyo ay di kumukumpas. Panahon, oras ay lumilipas, galing ng liwenyo ay di kumukumpas. Liwenyo, halina't sumabay sa tugtugin ng ating tagumpay. Silang nininig ang liwenyo magaling, bawat akting bawat liwenyo tayo. Liwenyo, halina't sumabay sa tugtugin ng ating tagumpay. Silang nininig ang liwenyo magaling,
Panahon, oras ay lumilipas, galing ng liwenyo ay di kumukumpas. Panahon, oras ay lumilipas, galing ng liwenyo ay di kumukumpas. Ay di
In the heart of Seinäjoki, we have Seinäjoki University of Applied Sciences. International, entrepreneurial, best for our students.
For me as a student, it's easy to discuss and ask help from the staff and the teachers. They are very encouraging towards the students, and the spirit of CMP is very international, friendly, and you almost feel like a second home and a place where you can progress as a professional and a student.
Here we have modern facilities and a superb learning environment. But it's not all about our own university. We are focusing on being international in every aspect. We have about 200 partner universities in over 50 countries. We haven't forgotten about research, development, and innovation either. We also provide many kinds of tailored services for companies and organizations where our students can participate in during their studies. We just scratch the surface with what we have to offer. Be curious and explore for more information.
Bicol University, or BU, the premier university in the Bicol region, Philippines. is a SUP Level 4 institution by Department of Budget and Management or DBM standards, established on June 21, 1969 following the passage of Republic Act 5521. It has 17 colleges spread across its 7 campuses in the provinces of Albay and Sorsogon, with the College of Law and the College of Medicine as its latest addition, and recently the Doctor of Dental Medicine and Doctor of Veterinary Medicine. As of latest count, Bicol University has 82 AACOP accredited academic programs, with 3 programs accredited at Level 4. It is also a Level 3 accredited institution whose reputation as a premier university in the Bicol region is rooted in its consistent top-level performance in various licensure examinations, becoming recognized as top-performing school in accountancy, social work, midwifery, nursing, education, and engineering. BU has been given its seal of excellence as CHED recognized Center of Excellence in Teacher Education, Center of Development in Nursing Education, Center of Development in Fisheries Education, and Center for Higher Education Research. Its commitment toward national thrust and directions and in meeting the needs of its community beyond the university borders is reflected in its programs and projects as base agency for Bicol Consortium for Health Research and Development or BCHRD and base agency for Bicol Consortium for Agriculture, Aquatic and Natural Resource Research and Development or BCARD. Over the years, it has earned its place as one of the 22 leading state universities in the Philippines. Bicol University has also been recently rated as 3-star institution by the Quacquarelli Simmons U.S. Intelligence Unit, the independent compiler of U.S.
Binubuenyo, halina't sumabay sa tutugin ng
Recording in progress.
tagumpay. So'y nagniningning ng binubuenyong magaling. Ikaw at ako, binubuenyo tayo.
Panahon, oras ay lumilipas. Galing ng biwenyo ay di kumukupas. Panahon, oras ay lumilipas. Galing ng biwenyo ay di kumukupas.
Binubuenyo, halina't sumabay sa tutugin ng ating tagumpay. So'y nagniningning ng binubuenyong magaling. Ikaw at ako, binubuenyo tayo. Binubuenyo, halina't sumabay sa tutugin ng ating tagumpay. So'y nagniningning ng binubuenyong magaling.
test, mic. Hello, test. Hello, mic. Test, mic. Okay na? Hello, good day everyone. Welcome to the third International Research Conference. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished researchers, scholars, and guests. It is a privilege to be here today under the theme Harmonizing Research and Health Practice, Perspectives of Bicol University and Sinayoki University. This conference brings together two prestigious universities fostering creative exchanges and collaborations for advancements in research and healthcare. We will embark on an exciting journey of exploration with participants from Bicol University, Philippines, Sinayoki University in Finland, and other global institutions. So let's explore the vast pool of knowledge and expertise while forging new partnerships and engaging in meaningful discussions. As our opening program unfolds, we introduce three essential parts in succession. We begin with the doxology, which invokes blessings on our learning journey. Next, we witness a ceremonial display of the flags of the Philippines and Finland, symbolizing the conference's solidarity and diversity. Finally, both countries' national anthems celebrate our distinct identities and shared values of integrity, unity, and resilience across borders.
Bayang magiliw, pelas ng silanganan, anak ng puso, sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, tuyad ka na makitig, sa manlulupig, di ka pasisili, sa dagat at bundok, sa simoy at sa langit mababaw. Nilagang tulad, awit sa paglayang minamahal. Pag-islap ng matawat mo'y tagumpay na naniningig. Ang bituin at araw niya kailan pang may magdidilim. Lupa ng araw ng ating pagsinta mo'y langit sa piling mo. Aming ligay anak ay mga pinamamatay ng dahil sa'yo. Suomi synnyin maa, soi sana kultainen. Ei Laaksoa, ei Kukkulaa, ei vettä rantaa rakkaampaa kuin kotimaa tää pohjoinen maa kallisisien. Ei Laaksoa, ei Kukkulaa, ei vettä rantaa rakkaampaa kuin kotimaa tää pohjoinen maa kallisisien.
Meanwhile, virtual participants join via Zoom and Facebook Live. And it's our hope to catch a glimpse of all our participants on screen, fostering a sense of connection and inclusivity across both physical and virtual settings. It is my privilege to introduce the president of the premier university in the Bicol region, Philippines. His name embodies his visionary approach, inspiring the members of the Bicol University community and encapsulating the institution's ethos of being a university for humanity. Benjamin, an 8-letter name, symbolizes broadening excellence, nurturing journeys, advancing missions, inspiring networks. The first 2 letters are B and E, which stands for broadening excellence, emphasizing the commitment to productive scholarship and academic excellence. The third and fourth letters are N and J, which means nurturing journeys, highlighting transformative leadership, guiding his constituents toward personal and societal growth. The fifth and sixth letters are A and M for advancing missions, representing collaborative service, working together to achieve common goals and benefit society. And the last 2 letters are I and N for inspiring networks, reflecting the distinctive character and fostering connections and relationships that contribute to sustainable societies. Ladies and gentlemen, to give us his welcome address, SUP President 4, Dr. Baby Boy Benjamin D. Nebres III.
To the Dean of Bicol University College of Nursing, Dr. Jean Annette S. Ivo, the Associate Dean, fellow Bicol University administrators, program advisors, department chairpersons, faculty, and administrators from our partner university in Finland, Seinäjoki University, participants, researchers, other guests, good morning. It is my honor and privilege to welcome all of you in this hybrid conference on harmonizing research and health practice, perspectives of Bicol University and Seinäjoki University. In this day, an age of fast technology and changing values, it is important to be critical of what we believe in and how we view issues of national and global interest on health and well-being. This is to ensure that our thoughts and actions are consistent with each other, especially if it is grounded on scientific research. After all, to be informed is to be forearmed. That is precisely what this hybrid international conference will do today to one of the most pressing issues of global and national interest, the health practices and perspectives and how we are able or unable to harmonize through the lens of research. We are honored with the presence of distinguished guests and speakers, and special to work together with Seinäjoki University in Finland. Warmest thanks, as always, to the efforts of our International Relations Office for forging collaborative partnerships in the name of service and scholarship. It's not every day that we get to listen to and exchange ideas, as well as get perspectives from giant minds. I hope that we won't take this conference for granted because, as Filipinos, it is our duty and a privilege at the same time to ensure that we are actively involved in the life of our nation and properly informed on issues that truly matter. Whatever happens, at the end of the day, we only have one country and we will always be Filipinos by heart, if not by affiliation. But this should not stop us from becoming citizens of the world as we fully engage with our global partners. On behalf of a grateful Bicol University community, welcome to this highly informative and eye-opening hybrid international conference on harmonizing research and health practices. As a University for Humanity for Sustainable Societies, we intend to fulfill the felt need of people, especially our clients, on matters of health so that we can respond to shaping sustainable societies. We hope that your eyes will be open to fresh realities from various angles and form a highly critical mindset that will lead to a better understanding or relearning of our past and our future as we continue to search and discover new knowledge through the frontiers of research. To our guests and to everyone, may all who engage with Bicol University live as friends. Thank you. Diyos ang mabalos sa gamas.
We sincerely thank Dr. Baby Boy Benjamin Dinabres, the third SUC President 4 of Bicol University, for his inspiring welcome. His visionary commitment created an atmosphere of interest, cooperation, and innovation, setting the tone for the conference. And as we reflect on his words, we anticipate engaging discussions and valuable insights ahead. Ladies and gentlemen, honored participants and guests, I'm delighted to introduce the youngest university president and CEO of Seinäjoki University, whose true passion is international cooperation and building strategic partnerships. This gentleman exemplifies a dedication to higher education excellence and innovation, as evidenced by his extensive experience and competence in academic leadership. As we eagerly await his welcome remarks, we want to express our heartfelt gratitude for his innovative leadership and commitment to advancing research and education. Live from Seinäjoki University, Finland, please join me in greeting Dr. Jaakko Halliwa.
Marhai na hapon sa Indogabos. Good morning and welcome to this esteemed third International Research Conference, a collaborative effort between Bicol University from the Philippines and Seinäjoki University of Applied Sciences from Finland. It gives me immense pleasure to address you all today as we gather here to celebrate the spirit of cooperation and the pursuit of knowledge in the field of nursing. I extend a warm welcome to our distinguished President Nebres, esteemed faculty members, guests, and enthusiastic students who have joined us for this significant occasion. This conference stands as a testament to the power of international cooperation in advancing healthcare and nursing education. The partnership between our Seinäjoki University of Applied Sciences and Bicol University underscores the importance of sharing expertise, experiences, and insights across borders. Nursing as a profession plays a vital role in promoting health, preventing diseases, and providing compassionate care to individuals and communities worldwide. Therefore, it is imperative for us to come together, learn from each other, and explore innovative approaches that can enhance nursing practices in Asia and in Europe. The theme of this conference, Fostering International Cooperation in Nursing, is especially crucial in today's interconnected world. By fostering cooperation between our universities, we pave the way for meaningful exchanges that enrich our understanding of nursing theory and practice. Our shared goal is not only to educate and train skilled registered nurses, but also to contribute to the advancement of healthcare systems that prioritize patient well-being and public health. Throughout the sessions and discussions today, for today's event, I encourage all participants to actively engage, exchange ideas, and build lasting connections. Let us leverage this platform to explore emerging trends, address challenges, and identify opportunities for collaboration that can drive positive change in nursing education and healthcare delivery. As we embark on this journey of collaboration and mutual learning, let us remember that the impact of our efforts extends far beyond the confines of this conference. The knowledge shared here today has the potential to shape the future of nursing education and practice in both our countries and beyond. I would like to express my gratitude to the organizers from both universities and all those who have contributed to making this conference a reality. Your dedication and commitment are instrumental in fostering meaningful partnerships. Bicol region has a special place in my heart. My wife has graduated from Bicol University's sociology program. I have personally visited the Daraga campus about 10 years ago. I should be very happy to meet you all in person when we visit there the next time. In closing, I wish you all a productive and inspiring conference. Thank you once more for your presence and participation. Together, let us embrace the spirit of cooperation and embark on a journey towards a brighter future for nursing. Hagat ko sa Indo ang successful na conference. Sana mag-iring kita sa Bicol. Mabalos.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yapu Haliwa. And what more fitting opening for this international conference than to start with the welcoming addresses from the presidents of the two prestigious higher education institutions collaborating from the Philippines and Finland. Their remarks set the tone for the event, embodying the spirit of partnership and scholarly exchange that defines this gathering. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce an accomplished nurse educator from the Bicol University College of Nursing. She has passionately dedicated herself to advancing nursing research and education throughout her remarkable career. Her leadership in fostering global partnerships and enhancing research quality is truly admirable. As the chair of the International Linkage and Consortia Committee, she is entrusted with providing the overview of the third International Research Conference. Please make way for Dr. Alma S. Banwa.
Magandang hapon. Good afternoon, Philippines. Magandang hapon. Good afternoon, Philippines. Hiva Humenta. Good morning, Finland. The third International Research Conference is the collaboration between Bicol University and Senayoke University. It aims to unite under the theme Harmonizing Research and Health Practice, perspectives of Bicol University and Senayoke University. This is a two-day conference that will take place today and tomorrow utilizing a hybrid platform. The conference aligns with the Sustainable Development Goal number 3's mission to ensure the healthy lives and promote well-being for all ages, serving as a platform for global collaboration and knowledge exchange. The conference objectives are threefold. Number 1, knowledge exchange and innovation. To facilitate the exchange of ideas, research findings, and innovative practice to encourage continuous learning and improvements. Number 2, networking opportunities to create avenues for networking and professional relationship building among student and faculty researchers, academics, and healthcare professionals, promoting future collaborations and partnerships. And number 3, research-driven solutions to emphasize the translation of research outcomes into tangible solutions for addressing real-world health challenges, bridging the gap within research and health practice. Day 1 will consist of presentations from the keynote speaker and plenary speakers. Our keynote speaker will address the conference theme, Harmonizing Research and Health Practice. Our plenary speakers will navigate critical topics at the intersection of academia and healthcare, including the role of academic institutions in advancing universal healthcare and addressing the evolving landscape of health literacy amidst the digital age. The second day of the conference will spotlight faculty research presentations that reflect the diverse research interests and initiatives of faculty members from both universities, addressing crucial aspects of healthcare, education, maternal health, and patient safety. This will contribute to the conference's overarching goal of promoting collaboration, knowledge exchange, and innovation in research and health practice. The third International Research Conference represents a pivotal moment for Bicol University and Senayoke University as we come together under the theme of harmonizing research and health practice. With an array of insightful presentations, engaging discussions, and fruitful collaborations ahead, we stand united in our commitment to making a positive impact on global health outcomes. Please join us on this journey of discovery and collaboration. Kitos. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Banwa, for your insights on the Third International Research Conference. Your overview has enriched our understanding and set the stage for fruitful discussions and collaborations. Now, ladies and gentlemen, may I introduce a dedicated faculty and a member of the Committee on International Linkage and Consortia at BUCN. She has been entrusted with the vital task of presenting the participants from the Philippines to this prestigious gathering at the Third International Research Conference. Please join me in welcoming Professor Senia C. Clemenya as she takes on this important responsibility.
pleasant day to everyone. Our distinguished guests, colleagues, and participants, today we are privileged to be joined by a diverse array of participants representing various disciplines of our esteemed university. As I call your college, please virtually raise your hand. May I start, of course, with the students and faculty as well as non-teaching personnel of Bicol University College of Nursing. The College of Medicine, the College of Social Science and Philosophy, the College of Education, and the College of Science. May we acknowledge as well the teaching and non-teaching personnel from the Palangi campus and the faculty members of Tobacco campus. Additionally, we are honored to have virtual participants, both students and faculty from Sinayuki University, who will be virtually contributing their insights and expertise to our discussions tomorrow. As we gather here today, let us embrace the opportunity to engage in meaningful dialogue, foster interdisciplinary collaboration, and explore ways to bridge the gap between research and health practice. Together, we aim to not only deepen our understanding of key issues, but also to pave the way for tangible solutions that will benefit our respective communities. I am confident that the perspectives shared by our distinguished presenters will inspire innovative approaches and pave the way for transformative change. Once again, welcome, and we thank you all for being part of this enriching experience.
A doctoral researcher and senior lecturer from Seinäjoki University may now present the participants from Finland at the Third International Research Conference, Terhi Hapala.
Thank you for Bicol University, especially Dr. Alma S. Banua and the team. It's a pleasure to have such a wonderful cooperation with you. Today, we have the privilege of having participants both present here in the auditorium and joining us online. Our participants include Bachelor in Nursing students from both the Finnish and international nursing programs, as well as students from the Master of Healthcare program. We are also honored to have teachers from various programs in attendance, and also our Dean, Päivi Rinne. Your presence and participation make this event even more special. Thank you all for being here today. My name is Terhi Voltti, and I have been in charge for arranging this seminar with my dear colleague, Raila Kärnä.
Hello, nice to see you all.
Thank you to our presenters for recognizing the 3rd International Research Conference participants from the Philippines and Finland, and those from across the globe. To all attendees, we genuinely appreciate your valuable time. Our collective commitment to advancing knowledge and embracing the joy of learning binds us together in this endeavor. As we move forward with our program, I am honored to introduce the esteemed Dean of Bicol University College of Nursing, Legazpi City, Philippines. Her distinguished leadership and profound expertise in nursing education make her the ideal person to formally introduce our honored keynote speaker. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to Dr. Jean Annette S. Ibo.
A pleasant day, ladies and gentlemen, from Finland and Philippines. I am delighted to be here with you today, as it is my privilege and honor to introduce our keynote speaker. Our keynote speaker is a distinguished leader in the field of nursing, whose vast expertise and dedication to healthcare make him one of the standouts in the industry. He holds a degree in philosophy in health profession leadership from Seton Hall University, New Jersey, a master's degree in critical care nursing from Columbia University, and a bachelor's degree from Bicol University, our very own university. His academic foundation is complemented by his professional nursing licenses, including an advanced practice nurse in New Jersey. His career includes prestigious positions: professor, executive director, the George M. and Vice W. Billingsley Endowed Chair in Nursing, and Chief Nurse Administrator at the University of Arkansas Eleanor Mann School of Nursing. In addition to these leadership roles, he also serves as the Health Policy Specialization Coordinator for the PhD in Public Policy Program at the University of Arkansas Graduate School and International Education. His commitment to education and mentoring is evident in his involvement as a PhD dissertation committee chair, member, and examiner of different research works. He serves on the editorial boards of the American Association of Colleges of Nursing, Advanced Critical Care Journal, and Progress in Transplantation, demonstrating his ongoing commitment to advancing the field of nursing. His extensive experience includes academic at renowned institutions such as Johns Hopkins University, the University of Michigan, and the Wayne State University. His achievements have been recognized with numerous honors and awards. Among these are the We Are Initiative Round of Applause Recognition for Caring, a recognition initiative which aims to express gratitude and appreciation for faculty who demonstrate extraordinary care for their colleagues and students above and beyond their job's requirement. The Paul Dudley White International Scholar Award from the American Heart Association, which recognizes the team of authors with highest ranked scientific abstract for every participating country in American Heart Association scientific meeting, and his induction as a fellow of the American Academy of Nursing. His scholarly work is prolific. His impact is reflected through 1,877 citations. In addition to these professional roles, he is deeply involved in community service, volunteering his expertise as registered nurse in various communities and healthcare system. His dedication to service, mentorship, and leadership in healthcare is truly exemplary. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Jesus M. Casida, a visionary leader who continues to shape the future of nursing and healthcare with his passion, knowledge, and commitment. Thank you.
So thank you. I do have a slide to share for everyone. If someone could tell me if the audience could hear me. Yes, no? All right. Thank you, Dean Ebo, for your kind introduction. Also, I would like to thank Dr. Vanua for inviting me to deliver a keynote today. I have a slide to share to everyone, and I just want to fix it. All right. Okay. So that said, I would like to say good morning or good afternoon. It's 1 o'clock in the morning here in Arkansas. So good morning to the audiences from Sinayoki University, and good afternoon the audiences from Beagle University for coming to this third International Research Conference. The theme of today's conference touches on the harmonious relationship between research and health practices, or I think one can expand it to the healthcare practices situated in healthcare delivery system where the nurse's role is central in shaping health behaviors at the individual level and health practices at the systems level. As shown in your conference packet, to the best of my knowledge, you have this information about the rationale of the conference, which included knowledge exchange and innovation, networking opportunities, and I put an emphasis on research-driven solutions, and I'll get back to that. Also, I pick up some themes on the description of the conference that all leads to improving quality of life. For example, I believe this is aligned with your strategic directions about ensuring healthy lives and promote well-being across the lifespan, health systems management and development. So through developing innovative healthcare delivery system for a specific country or for both countries, that leads to quality of life. And research informing health and healthcare delivery system, that also leads in quality of life. Since I'm a nurse scientist, most of my focus at this presentation is centering the role of a nurse scientist and how improving one's quality of life. For example, quality of life is a very important variable that is highly sensitive to nursing intervention. So a nursing scientist or a nurse researcher can do many things to manipulate antecedents or variables that improves the quality of life of a patient or a family or the population as a whole. So also, the conference had three overarching objectives, and I highlighted here are the areas that I would like to emphasize, perhaps remind some audiences. They may or may already know what I'm going to talk about, but I think it's nice to bring it to the light that effective best practices in research are very important, and we'll get there. And then I talk about here, one of the objectives is about collaboration. So I would like to share my perspective on not just initiating, but how do you sustain
an impactful and meaningful collaborative research or team science. And about transformation of knowledge, we all know that developing science through research is not just like producing knowledge, but our goal is to transform knowledge into tangible outcomes to effective utilization of research results. So once again, these are all from your information that I got about the description of these conference. So collectively in context, my talks is centered around the rational and substantive descriptors that I found about the conference, as well as the objectives. So going back to what I said earlier, that again, I apologize that I thought this is a nursing science conference, so I'll centering more on nursing science. However, our physician colleagues and other colleagues in healthcare discipline could also like use this concept. So for the nurses here, the audience is, I would like to challenge you about how nursing science can drive innovative research solutions to global health and healthcare practices. For example, improving one's quality of life. Well, in nursing, for some of our non-nursing colleagues here, is that we have this so-called meta paradigm of nursing. It's one of those theoretical framework that inform the practice of nursing. So it's basically these the nursing and the discipline itself. There's and the person and the health and the environment. When we do research, we need to look at them as a whole, and that's where the nursing lens is coming from. That we look at nursing science not just like a piece, for example, of a causative organism, but we look at the interaction of the person, the environment, and the health, and the discipline of nursing as well. So some examples for it, like if we want to study nursing and how it affects the person and health and environment, and this meta paradigm of nursing is where, if we're interested in looking at the well-being or the role or the practice of a nurse, and we also look at the other dimensions in this construct or paradigm. One of the emerging science, I am not very familiar what's going on in the Philippines as well as in Finland, but in the United States, we're very concerned lately with climate changes and also planetary health, which is a very important aspect of nursing that we can use the meta paradigm concept and looking at the interrelationship of the person, the health, as well as environment, and the nurse, for example, delivering care. So one of the interesting aspect actually of talking about driving research solution through nursing science or nursing science lens to improve the quality of life of a particular person with the increasing temperature of the planet Earth in Arizona, as well as in the other southern states, which we have very high temperature, and our scientists creatively tested an intervention that all of these farmers could wear during harvest of a fruit, and then something to cool them down, cool down their brain, and then I would say the central nervous system, among others, that leads to a reduction in dehydration, as well as reduction in kidney stone formation. So I just want to bring that out, that again, just to shed light on the meta paradigm concept of nursing that forms the practice of nursing, as well as the important element of nursing practice, where it can produce highly impactful and meaningful research that can drive I would say that could produce solutions to a particular problem, for example, climate changes. So let me just touch on the development and implementation of effective research practices, which is, I believe, is one of the research objectives that the audience should either need to have some review or pick on perhaps critique some of the research that's going to be presented throughout these conferences. So one of the things that I would like to share to everyone is, first and foremost, when you do research, you cannot do it alone, and you have to do it with others, a team. So form a good, if not great, investigative teams, meaning each team members have a complementary expertise and competencies about the research that's being done or a phenomenon that's being explored. And during that particular phase of forming the team is make sure that roles and expectations are delineated from the principal investigator to the staff and other co-investigators in the research team. So it starts from conceptualization and development of proposal, submission to the institutional review board or for ethical approval and study preparations, and then talk about who's doing who about implementation, data collection and analytics, and then dissemination. This is very important that the team must be upfront, right? The first meeting of forming a research team about dissemination, for example, who's going to be the lead author, the senior author, the second author during, let's say, presentation in a conference or publication. Then at the conceptualization phase, you must have, or the research team must have a good grasp of the state of the science of a particular topic, or else you cannot move forward to do the conceptualization of research. Because a strong state of the science or having a nice understanding of the state of the science of a particular phenomenon or clinical interest must lead to developing a research question or a purpose or a study aims. And of course, you cannot do research without funding, whether it is a small or a large scale research. Funding is very important, not just like for the team, but also for the study subjects or study participants. The next best practices, if you will, or effective research practices is having the protocol or the science should have logic and rigor. As I've said earlier, the state of the science should be present and have a nice, crisp, robust synthesis of the literature, not the litany of it. And then maybe if we have time later during the question and answer forum, I would like to, explain what a litany means. So for a logical presentation and rigor that leads to a research question, I usually like follow this logic. What is known of the phenomenon, what is not known, and then what is the gap that you want to address in order for that, let's say you want to create research to drive solutions to a particular problem. And then, so the usual the methods, design, study procedure, data collection, management, and analytic plan, they should be all clearly linked to the state of the science and to the knowledge gap of the research. And of course, timetable. I cannot say anymore here. If you are doing a clinical trial, particularly with behavioral intervention or behavioral outcome, or even pharmacological agents, it's important to have a treatment fidelity or intervention fidelity, and it must be included in a research protocol. The purpose of having a treatment fidelity or treatment fidelity plan, it's almost like a lesson plan during research, that you have to ensure that all the check boxes are completed during the delivery of the intervention to minimize threats to internal validity of the study. So this is one of the examples of a treatment fidelity plan that I just completed a little over a year ago when I did a two arms of a randomized trial. This is a biobehavioral intervention specific for patients with artificial organs or artificial hearts. So as you can see here, like there are some dimensions or the taxonomic domain. The self-management is the concept that I was like testing in terms of intervention. So, so these are just like a enumeration of what are those domains should be, from the knowledge and skill requisite that you expect from the participants to demonstrate, what are the content, and then who delivers it. Let's say here's nurse practitioner, the method of communications during the study. One arm is I'm comparing the telephone and face-to-face versus the telephone face-to-face and the mobile application through push notification, text messages, and video chat. And I will expand this to AI. And then include the dosing parameters is very important, like specifically in the intensity and the complexity of the intervention. For example, here, the frequency of follow-up, how many weeks? And this has to be, weeks and months has to be parallel with the other arm of the study. Then list the resources that the participants need to have, and then the environment, and of course, the outcome measures. So this, again, this is almost like a checklist that each patient or each participant who completed the trial in a particular follow-up must complete all of these taxonomic domains or elements so that you're ensure that during the clinical trial, all of those intervention or things that you're manipulating, particularly variables of interest that you want to manipulate, to, let's say, improve the quality of life or decrease healthcare utilization, you are almost 100% confident that the participant received the intervention that they needed. So again, treatment fidelity plan, a lot of researchers, even when I review NIH funding, some of them are very experienced, they forget those treatment fidelity plan in the research proposal. So another research practices that I think we all should aspire for, whether it's a student or a seasoned scientist, do not forget that that's the research question appropriately answered, let's say, the following research designs and methods. One of the things that sometimes still is happen, again, this is just based on my experience, whether I review a manuscript or a research grant, the research question or the study aim does not align with the methods or the research design is selected. For example, retrospective study, again, I have a feeling there's some students here. So remember, retrospective is something new. You needed it for the next research. That's not the end, it's just the beginning. Prospective, usually better than retrospective if properly done. Qualitative research, more than likely you want to do this if the phenomenon is not known or very little is known, or if you want to use it for theory development. Mixed method design, both, particularly qualitative research method, the data that you'll get from qualitative research method enhances the richness of the quantitative results. Specifically, let's say, if you have a clinical trial that came out as a non-statistically significant findings, so you can use qualitative data to expand or perhaps explain, not necessarily the mechanism of the results, but for example, the extent to which the results is clinically significant. Multi-center trials, once again, some pitfalls, folks, they will do, let's say, retrospective study in doing multiple centers. That's a waste of time. So you only research multi-center trials or multi-site trials if your aim is to increase generalizability. And when you go to dissemination and implementation phase of the research translational paradigm, which I'm going to show you later. And this is particularly very important when you're talking about research that drives solution, is you need a strong science coming from multiple sites to inform policy. So now let's talk about the ugly component of doing research. I mean, research that are ugly. So in the conceptualization phase, some folks will already like thinking about the methods. They don't even have a research question. They're already thinking, oh, I'm going to do a randomized trial, or I'm going to do a qualitative study. They don't even have a research question. And then the kitchen sink model, basically you want to study the entire world, or you want to boil the ocean rather than focusing on a particular problem, or thinking of every possible variable you want to test in a very small sample size. And even worse is no or lack of conceptual or theoretical or hypothetical framework. So how can you test your hypotheses and among other things if you don't have that guiding principles? And then during implementation, a little, I would say, not careful with systematic and random errors. So if possible, you eliminate systematic as well as random errors. Random errors is just one of those things, maybe, one or two occasions you've done some random errors, and I usually just like put a note on that particular patient, participants, I code it, and then see how the data will pan out. Worst case scenario, if that particular study participants have multiple random errors, that has to be eliminated from the analysis. And again, the threat for internal validity is really, really not good in a particular research. So if all of these, let's say, are present, and the ugly research, all aspects of these almost like invalidate the results of the study. And how about bad? So that was ugly, now this is bad. Poor planning, resulting to increased attrition of participants. The completers keeps on falling off or dropping like flies. There's a disjointed team science, like the personal, let's say, quitting or randomly like doing other things, and the scientific expertise of the team is not sound or somewhat weak. So that's a problem. And then when someone make a definitive conclusion or make an inference of a very low powered study, that's not a good example of a research practice. And then if someone make a generalizable statement, but it is not a randomized trial and not less, and it's not a diverse population, that's also a bad practice of research. So once again, if these are present in a particular study, there might have some merit or validity of the results, but still it will be hard for you to publish it. So in summary, all research methods are good if appropriately used. Otherwise, it will be bad, or ugly, it cannot be disseminated, such as publication. So try to practice good or great effective research practices in health and healthcare studies produced by nurses, or other nurse scientists or other scientists. This is also essential in advancing or informing the care of patients, family, and healthcare system, clinician and leadership outcomes, as well as, again, policy formation at the health systems, organization, state, or country level. So now, if you could remember on the objectives of the study, there's a lot of emphasis on best practices of research as well as utilization of research results. I want to show you a model that I used. Maybe some of you or many of you are familiar with the translational research paradigm. There's a lot of sometimes well-funded studies or nicely done studies or nicely done research that there's no impact, or the influence is minimal or almost nothing, because let's say it was done once and then they stop and they go somewhere else. So this is just a reminder that when we do research, whether in nursing, medicine, public health, or other discipline, whether you start as a bench, when you're starting, let's say, understanding a particular clinical problem as the bench science, let's say an animal lab, or for behavioral intervention, that you are understanding it, exploring or understanding the phenomenon. So that falls on the first phase, or the T1 of this paradigm. So the results here from, start from the bench or from exploratory studies, should have some form of knowledge that you're gaining here to inform a design of a study that could be due as a clinical trials. And then on the second stage, the studies that emerge from this study, that should inform the efficacy. So in efficacy studies, you're basically like looking at the effect of intervention A versus B. You know, one or two clinical sites is enough for that, just to get a good sense of how this intervention works. So it depends again. So I have one intervention that took me probably 4 or 5 times, 5 different studies in the T2, because I also insert some innovative methods to maximize the outcome of the particular outcome I would like to target, such as reduction in healthcare utilization. So, here the researcher or the team should keep on looking at how to maximize the efficacy of these, so that could lead to systematic reviews, meta-analysis, and the dissemination phase that will also inform quality improvement. So if you have a solid science here and then done some of these, or if not many, that is ready for the almost like a, not final because this is circular, the next stage of the research, which is the translation and dissemination phase, that includes comparative effectiveness research. So that's where the cost-benefit analysis comes place. That could be a policy analysis and among others. And because once you have, let's say, a good results here from multi-centers or multiple sites, multiple countries, that is now ripe for informing policy, such as practice-guided trial design that will lead to evidence-based practice and policy development, I should say. But again, let's say if there are some areas here that needs to be tightened up or needs to be improved, it goes back again to the circle. So, because at the end of the day, in health sciences, including nursing and medicine, among others, our goals is to improve health and healthcare outcomes. So the Johns Hopkins, as the dean mentioned, I was a professor at the Johns Hopkins University. We expanded this T3 in this model. In the interest of time, I will just let you look at the Johns Hopkins evidence-based practice model. This is a nurse-driven, but it's interdisciplinary in nature. That starts from having a good understanding of the phenomenon, starting with the inquiry, and it goes into these steps of translations and measurements, and basically a continuous, almost like a continuous quality improvement to achieve, let's say, the desired health system outcomes. For example, reduction in ventilator-acquired pneumonia for, let's say, the first 30 days or 60 days of folks in the intensive care unit. So I think the last aspect of my talk is about how do you sustain productive and impactful research collaboration. I am not very familiar with the collaboration between the two universities, but I have an assumption that you can start these particular practical strategies, if you will, that I would like to share at this conference, whether today or tomorrow or at the end, in order for you to have a sustained, productive, impactful, meaningful, and influential collaboration that would drive solution, let's say, health and healthcare issues, and those solutions emerge from your collaboration. And I urge you to think about those research collaboration that could lead to a policy change, whether at a regional or state levels, or in a particular country. So going back to the theme is harmonizing research and health practice. I look at the simple definition of harmonizing. It's produce harmony. Basically, it's a gerund of harmonize. The synonyms of harmonized is go together, well coordinated, so, and then how do you enact that well coordination? So in my opinion, it has to be mutual collaboration among individual groups or institutions, such as the two universities in the Philippines and Finland respectively, and then come up with a mutually agreed outcomes. And we'll get back to that. And those practices that you would like to look at is what is the role of individual in maintaining health and preventing diseases, and action and behaviors that individuals engage to promote well-being and prevent diseases. And then one of the things in the artificial organs community, I was successful in defining the concept of self-care and self-management and present a conceptualization and operationalization and measurement of both of those. And I want to bring back again to the nurse-sensitive outcomes, think about nursing mega paradigm. So that said, for this particular collaboration, I presented to you my, I love concepts, I love conceptual model, because particularly nurses and physicians are visual learners. So I think this is how you should look at this from a harmonizing or the harmonious relationship in creating your science as a result of better or best healthcare behaviors that leads to improving quality of life. As I've mentioned earlier, I thought this is a nursing conference, so pardon my bias with nursing science. So central to this is the role of a nurse, because when you look at the meta paradigm concept of nursing is we'll look at let's say the 4 domains that shape us the so-called nursing lens. So what are the next steps? If this has not been done, I would encourage that the group should start with small and then think of what are the immediate outcome of the collaborations, form a team science, and then talk about the impactful research studies at year 1, 2, or 3. Continue the annual conference. I suggest have a day for retreat or debriefing after conference, and then talk about the deliverables for the next year, for example. And then long-term goals for collaboration. The partnership has to be strategic. It has to have a collective mission and vision and strategic directions, as well as outcomes you want to accomplish. Talk about capacity building. Remember what I said earlier, that research cannot be done by 1 or 2 persons. And then how? Then within that long-term question that I was asking the 2 universities are start with an environmental scan or the usual SWOT analysis, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Explore organizational research priorities and needs. And I think that's already emphasized at Beckel University. Then look at individuals and groups' competencies and strengths, complementary or synergy. And this is hard to form. The culture of discovery, inquiry, innovation, and scholarship. I let you handle those, because those are all, again, role modeling, leaderships, and many, many other things you can do. And then have, again, as a part of organizational culture development, is ensure that the college or the university is agile, adaptive, innovative, and then risk-taker. And then perhaps the 2 institutions could develop a research enterprise that has infrastructures that compose of research teams, analytics people, research administrators, finance, among others. And I have a feeling you have Office of Technology Transfer to build that research enterprise. Very important academic practice relationships model. The role of academe in influencing practice and practice influencing the academic sphere in terms of developing research. And then things about a brand. What do you want to be known for globally? So in conclusion, utilization of best practices in research, from knowledge development to dissemination and beyond, are important in harmonizing research in health and healthcare practices to optimal outcomes, such as quality of life at the individual level, as well as other things at the systems level. A collective mission, vision, and strategic directions is warranted to produce a meaningful research that advance nursing and healthcare sciences, that includes medicine, and then also advance the education that shapes policy. And finally, impactful research and scholarship is not a race, it's a marathon. In fact, when I advise the PhD students, I always ask them what specific topic that you want to be known for in the world, and that will be your lifetime work. And again, I've got this quote from Helen Keller: alone we can do so little, together we can do so much. Thank you. And this is our university. And by the way, we pronounce Arkansas as Arkansas, not Arkansas. There's actually a law in the state of Arkansas that forbidding people to call Arkansas when you are in the state of Arkansas. Thank you. Now I'm ready for questions if we have time.
Okay na ba? Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in extending our deepest gratitude to our keynote speaker, Professor and Executive Director of the Illinois Mann School of Nursing at the University of Arkansas, Fayetteville, Arkansas, USA, Dr. Jesus Casida. His keynote speech has enlightened us with valuable insights and perspectives, no doubt about that. Dr. Casida's expertise and thought-provoking presentation have enriched our understanding of the crucial relationship between effective research practices and evidence-based health and nursing practice. We sincerely appreciate your invaluable contribution to this conference, Dr. Casida. Thank you very much. We now transition to the open forum segment of our program. I am delighted to present our moderator, Professor Tu and Program Advisor for the Master of Arts in Nursing at Bicol University Graduate School, Dr. Nera A. Galan, may now lead us through an engaging discussion session. And we encourage all the attendees, both physical and virtual, to share your questions via online or Zoom, FB Live, all right? And I'm sure our keynote speaker stays with us to shed light on gray areas as far as the topic is concerned. Okay, Ma'am Nera?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Bartolata, and also to our esteemed speaker, Dr. Casida. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, all the attendees online and the attendees on site. So I would like to thank you all for your attention during the keynote address on the theme Harmonizing Research and Health Practice, Perspectives of Bicol University and Senioki University. Now, we'd like to open the floor for questions to be answered by our keynote speaker. So this is an opportunity to hear various viewpoints from each of us here. You can share not only questions, but also insights, experiences, and even unique findings from our research that you know that is related to the topic. And the one important takeaway that struck me here during the keynote speech of our speakers that a nurse-driven solutions framework towards innovations for global health and healthcare practice. So that's very inspiring to all nurses, and that's towards improvement of the health of the people. So do you agree with me? Yes. So you can share also your thoughts about the speech, and you can raise questions about some clarifications, or if you want to enlighten some discussion. But before we start, let me just remind you that let's have a respectful dialogue for a common understanding, and observe active listening when somebody's talking. So those in online, you can mute your devices while there is somebody asking questions, and when our speaker is answering questions also. And those on site, you may just raise your hands and you can ask questions. And by the way, please identify yourselves, or please state the institutions where you come from before you ask your questions. Okay? And if you want to say something, please do it constructively. To kick off our question and answer session, I'd like now to invite our participants, both online and on-site, to please raise your questions now. And of course, with the help of our technical committee, please help me see what's that? The chat box or the comments, those in online platform. Okay, so how about those on-site attendees? Do you want to share insights? Or you want to ask questions? Oh, I think there's none also. So it seems that it's fully understood by both the on-site and the online attendees. And I am so thankful for your for listening attentively, because that shows that you really learned from our topic today and no questions asked at all. Okay. So with that, so do we still have questions? Are there raising their raise hand reactions in their devices online? Okay, so let's wait for a while. And while we are waiting for additional questions maybe, or for some questions, I'd like to encourage our participants to reflect on the keynote address and share insights in your college as you go back to your respective institutions. And I am sure that everyone learned something new today from the topic itself. And let's continue our conversations beyond this forum, because, as the speaker says, let's have collaborations on research through network, maybe online conversation, or future research collaboration as an output or takeaway from this forum. So thank you so much, everyone. So may I now close the Q&A session. And I want to express my gratitude to Dr. Casida for graciously taking time to discuss his topic, and also enlightening discussions on harmonizing research and health practice. Thank you also to the participants for your active listening and engaging dialogue. Okay, so that ends the open forum for the first, or for the keynote speech. Okay, thank you.
With that, we bring the open forum session to a close. As we draw near to the conclusion of the opening program, it is my distinct honor to facilitate the awarding of a plaque of commendation to our esteemed keynote speaker, Dr. Jesus Casida. This plaque serves as a token of our sincere appreciation for his invaluable contributions to today's conference. So on behalf of Bicol University and Sinayoki University, it is with immense gratitude that we present you with this plaque of commendation. Your exceptional insights, expertise, and dedication to advancing research and health practice have profoundly enriched our conference today, leaving an unforgettable impression on all who have experienced your keynote address. Once again, thank you very much, Dr. Casida.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. And again, have a wonderful day and enjoy your conference. Have a good one.
Okay, so as we prepare to shift to our plenary sessions, we recognize the importance of taking care of our well-being. Therefore, we will now be observing at least 20-minute health break to allow everyone to stretch a little bit, probably, refresh, and rejuvenate before we resume our program. Again, 20-minute health break. And during this break, we encourage you to take a moment of your time to hydrate, grab a healthy snack, or engage in some light physical activity to keep you awake. And then feel free to we will resume. One of the focal points for this event, the third International Research Conference, would be the plenary sessions to provide attendees with an opportunity to learn from leading experts, collaborate with peers, and contribute to the collective knowledge and understanding of research and health practice. Ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to introduce our distinguished speaker for the first plenary session. Her journey in education and continuing professional advancement is a testament to her dedication and pursuit of excellence in the field of nursing and public health. It all began with her Bachelor of Science in Nursing degree from the University of the Philippines, or UP Manila College of Nursing, in 1992, laying the foundation for her career. Upon this, she for a postgraduate chosen field. Recognizing the importance of public health and epidemiology in addressing broader health issues, she undertook the challenge of earning a Doctor of Public Health degree, majoring in epidemiology from UP Manila College of Public Health in 2008. And this advanced degree positioned her as a leader in the field, capable of providing direct patient care and influencing policy and practice. Seeking to expand her horizons and engage in cutting-edge research, she embarked on postdoctoral fellowships. In 2012, she spent several months at the Johns Hopkins University School of Nursing in the USA, delving into the latest advancements in nursing research. Following this, in 2015, she pursued another postdoctoral fellowship, this time in data science at the Vienna University of Technology in Austria, further expanding her expertise and skill set. With her extensive educational background and diverse experiences, our plenary speaker has seamlessly transitioned into various roles throughout her career, from her early years as staff nurse in the Surgical Intensive Care Unit at the Philippine General Hospital to her tenure as a University Research Associate at UP Manila College of Nursing. She has consistently demonstrated her commitment to advancing the nursing profession. Her journey continued as she transitioned into the academe, serving as an assistant professor at UP Open U from 1999 to 2009. Over the years, she rose through the ranks, becoming an associate professor in 2009 and eventually attaining the position of professor in 2014. In addition to her teaching responsibilities, she has taken leadership roles, currently serving as the Dean of the College of Nursing at UP Manila since October 2017. Through her educational achievements and professional experiences, she exemplifies a lifelong commitment to learning, growth, and leadership in the field of nursing and public health. Her contributions to education, research, and practice continue to make a significant impact, inspiring the next generation of healthcare professionals to strive for excellence. With her extensive expertise and leadership in nursing education and healthcare policy, she is uniquely positioned to shed light on the vital topic of the role of academe in universal healthcare. Ladies and gentlemen, the Dean of the UP College of Nursing and Head, World Health Organization Collaborating Center for Leadership in Nursing Development at the University of the Philippines, Manila, Dr. Sheila R. Bonito.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to all our participants from the Philippines, and good morning to all those in Finland. I am honored to speak with you today on the topic of the role of the academe in the implementation of the universal healthcare here in the Philippines. So let me just share my slides. So I'm representing the University of the Philippines, Manila College of Nursing, as well as the Association of Deans of the Philippine Colleges of Nursing. I also sit as a member of the Commission on Higher Education Technical Panel for Nursing, who is in charge of developing plans, policies, standards, and guidelines concerning the operation of higher education in nursing here in the Philippines. The topic of the role of the academe in universal health care has been the focus of discussion even before the COVID-19 pandemic. But we have seen that with the challenges that we had during the COVID-19 pandemic, there is really a need to strengthen the health system as well as the implementation of universal health coverage in the country. So this is the flow of my presentation. So let me briefly discuss the Human Resources for Health focus of the Universal Healthcare Act that was enacted in 2019. Then discuss the curriculum reorientation that's happening in the field of nursing, as well as community immersion, faculty development, research and publication that we need to do as universities and colleges to be able to implement the Universal Healthcare Act. And then towards the end, let me discuss what's happening in terms of advancing public health nursing to be able to ensure that we will deliver the universal health care in the country. So let me show you what are the provisions of the Universal Healthcare Act when this was actually enacted in let me go back. So when this was enacted in 2019, the Commission on Higher Education, the Department of Health, as well as the PRC were actually mandated to coordinate the medical curriculum as well as the as well as the Department of Health and also the Board of Nursing to be able to reorient the healthcare profession in orienting the curriculum towards primary health care with emphasis on public health and primary care, and also to determine the recommended areas of study in public health to be incorporated in the curriculum of all health sciences education. And finally, to incorporate educational outcomes focusing on primary care in the education programs, scope of licensure examinations, continuing professional development programs for health professionals, as well as certification programs for healthcare workers. So this Universal Healthcare Act enacted in 2019, just before we entered into the COVID-19 pandemic, has the vision of providing to every Filipino the highest possible quality of healthcare that is accessible, efficient, equitably distributed, adequately funded, fairly financed, and appropriately used by an informed and empowered public. So in this Universal Healthcare Act, there are specific guidelines that were provided in a joint administrative order in 2021, July 2021. And this provision, the guidelines for the reorientation of health professions, education curricula, and training programs to primary health care has these following objectives. So one is to establish the guidelines for the reorientation of the curricula and standards for health professional and health worker education programs to primary health care. To install implementation mechanisms to integrate PHC principles into the education programs and licensure examination of health professionals. And finally, to define the roles of the Commission on Higher Education, the PRC, and the Department of Health on the reorientation of curricula and training programs to primary health care in accordance with the provisions of the Universal Healthcare Act. And to be able to achieve these objectives, some general guidelines were also included. So, for example, all curriculum and standards of health professional education and training programs need to be reoriented to primary health care, with emphasis on public health and primary care. And for the three institutions, Commission on Higher Education, the Professional Regulation Commission, and the Department of Health, to determine the recommended areas of study in public health to be incorporated in the curriculum of all health professions education. And finally, the primary health care to be incorporated into the learning outcomes of the programs, scope of licensure exam, and continuing professional development programs of all health professions. In reorienting to primary health care, so there are specific strategies that has to be done. So one is to include primary health care in the learning outcomes. Second is to conduct faculty development programs, so to ensure that faculty are also aware what are the provisions in the Universal Health Care Act and how are we teaching the concepts of primary health care to be able to implement the Universal Health Care Act. And third is to include primary care competencies in student internship. So in our community exposure in the related learning experience, primary care competencies should be highlighted amongst the course outcomes. 4, to include universal health care and primary health care in student orientations, immersion programs in primary care facilities. So there's also a need to be updated on what are the public health programs that we have from the Department of Health. 5th is to include primary health care as areas of study in the table of specifications in the nursing licensure examinations. So this was also very important in terms of the reorienting of the expectations of professionals when they take their licensure exams. And lastly is for return service obligations to be served in priority primary care facilities for government scholars. So these were the strategies that were highlighted as important in reorienting the curriculum, the programs of the health professions to primary health care. Let me just backtrack a bit and discuss what's actually happening in the nursing education curriculum. Actually, the Bachelor of Science in Nursing curriculum in the Philippines had a series of reorientation to primary health care. I mean, it's not only because of the universal health care that was enacted in 2019. In fact, in the University of the Philippines, Manila, the orientation to primary health care and competency-based education happened very early. And this was around the same time in 1978, when primary health care was actually declared in Alma Ata. And the University of the Philippines produced monographs in 1981 and 84, where specific competencies related to primary health care were already spelled out. Since the adoption of a single Bachelor of Science in Nursing curriculum in the country, provided for by the CHED Memorandum Order 10 in 1998, community health nursing and primary health care were already emphasized. And this was followed by another curriculum revision in 2001 when the community health nursing and with the Bachelor of Science in Nursing with associate in health science education was also implemented. And in this particular curriculum, there were 2 courses that were actually named primary health care. And these were clear demonstration of how primary health care were integrated in all professional nursing courses. In 2009, the competency-based and community-oriented curriculum was adopted and eventually published as the National Nursing Core Competency Standards in 2012. So I think it's very unique that here in the Philippines, we're following one curriculum and also all programs, undergraduate programs, are Bachelor of Science in Nursing program with orientation to primary health care. And the last curricular revision, major curricular revision that we have experienced is the 2017 outcomes-based education, where PHC, primary healthcare integration in all professional nursing courses were again highlighted. And in 2 standalone courses, the community health nursing one that focuses on individual and family nursing, and community health nursing 2 focusing on community and population groups. So what's essential in this curriculum reorientation is to highlight the specific concepts. So how we clarified, for example, the concept of primary health care and primary care. What are the approaches to care, the levels of care, and the levels of intervention as well as financing. So in this slide, let me just briefly describe. So primary healthcare is the overarching approach or philosophy, while the primary care is a level of care provision. So we always make this distinction because when we say universal health care, although majority of the financed services are actually at the primary care, we're not discounting that the scope of universal health care should actually be the entire primary health care as an approach. And it should cover both interventions at the public health and at the personal level. And financing for public health is of course population-based, whereas at the individual based, at the personal care is individual-based financing. In the provision of the Universal Health Care Act, Section 1, the population-based health services refer to interventions such as health promotion, disease surveillance, and vector control, which have population groups as recipients. And individual-based health services refer to services which can be accessed within a health facility or remotely that can definitely be traced back to one recipient. And it usually has a limited effect at the population level and does not alter the underlying cause of illness, such as ambulatory and inpatient care, medicines, laboratory tests, and procedures, among others. In terms of level of care, individual-based services that are both public health and personal care can be delivered at the primary care level, while the rest of personal care are delivered at the higher levels of care. Hence, primary care refers to a level of care financed through capitation from PhilHealth that provides both public health and personal care services. So in the next slide, so let me describe what is the healthcare provider network here in the Philippines. So the primary care facility is the first point of contact for almost all general conditions and the nearest hospital in the network for emergency cases. It is the duty of the facilities in the network, primarily the primary care facility, to direct the patient to the appropriate facilities for more appropriate management. Primary care facilities refer to the appropriate facilities within the network. Level 3 hospitals, as lead of the network, refer patients to APEX facilities, and APEX facilities refer patients for specialty care to the appropriate specialty centers within the network or national specialty centers. Working in networks with clear direction and role delineation of each facility can allow for both appropriate management and appropriate health sector investment. It will also be easier for Filipinos to understand where to go for in any health concerns. But this remains a challenge, especially if a wider dissemination of the different levels of care are not really emphasized in every municipality or even provinces. And also not having an efficient health information system for referrals may also hinder the provision of care and also the health-seeking behavior of Filipinos. And up to this day, this remains a challenge on how we can be more efficient in providing care using this framework of healthcare provider networks in every municipalities and provinces here in the Philippines. So next, let me show you the program outcomes of the CHED CMO that describes the outcomes-based education, and where the integration of primary health care in the BSN curriculum was actually demonstrated. So let me just highlight these are the program outcomes of the current curriculum that we have. And the ones that are highlighted are actually the ones that refer to the implementation, the integration of primary healthcare in the BS nursing curriculum. And also the primary care competencies that we have derived from these program outcomes, and the sample topics that are discussed in some of these primary care competencies. So the integration of primary health care in the BS nursing curriculum was evident immediately after the enactment of primary health care in the Philippines in 1979. But through the years and through many curricular revisions, we have refined the integration of these concepts in the professional courses in nursing. And usually the integration was done both in the lecture and in the clinical or field practicum of students, whether it's in the hospital or in the community setting. And the matrix of integration of primary healthcare and related concepts in nursing are also provided for in the CMO. So I will highlight the primary care competencies in the next slide. So the primary care competencies, so there are 7 primary care competencies that are now being highlighted. So the first one is the provision of the first contact care. So in the course learning outcomes, so this is actually covered by the following learning outcomes: establish an effective partnership with patients, assess and manage patients' clinical condition within the scope of practice of the profession, administer appropriate initial treatment within the scope of practice, and recognize the patients who require high levels of care. And the nursing courses where these learning outcomes are actually discussed are in courses like health assessment, health education, fundamentals of nursing practice, nutrition and diet therapy, pharmacology, and healthcare ethics. The next primary care competency is in providing primary comprehensive care. And this is where students learn about considering the patient's family community context in planning for care management, implementing individual, family, and community health care, and counseling patients on general disease prevention and health promotion. And these particular course outcomes are actually spread in several courses in the curriculum, which include care of mother, child, adolescent, care of mother and child at risk or with problems, care of clients with problems in oxygenation, fluid, electrolyte, infections, inflammatory and immunologic response, cellular aberration, care of the older person, care of clients with problems in nutrition, and nursing care of clients with life-threatening conditions. So these same courses also contain the primary care competency on providing continuing care with learning outcomes, specifically sustaining harmonious and continuing relationships with patients and clients, and plans for continuing care for patients with chronic conditions post-discharge and those referred back to primary care. So continuing on to the next sets of primary care competencies. So coordinating care is about the learning outcomes on referring specialty care and higher levels of care as necessary, guiding patients in conduct of referrals for medications, diagnostic tests and services, participating in multidisciplinary care and interprofessional care, communicating effectively and assisting patients in navigating through agencies and resources. And these learning outcomes can be seen in courses like and topics like nursing, leadership, and management. The next is managing patients' records. So for this particular competency, the course learning outcomes are about ensuring quality of patient care records in terms of accuracy, completeness, reliability, and timeliness, maintaining privacy and security of patient information, demonstrating familiarity with the use of existing and mandated health information systems. And there is a particular course, nursing informatics, that are also discussing these learning outcomes, as well as documentation in several nursing courses. The sixth primary care competency is about promoting health. And the course learning outcomes are understanding and explaining fundamental concepts of health promotion and disease prevention, effectively communicating with families and communities the practices that promote health, and implementing strategies that promote inclusivity to identify vulnerable groups to improve access to primary care. And these are covered particularly in the course on health promotion and risk communication. And the last primary care competency is implementing public health functions. So these are covered by course learning outcomes on understanding fundamental concepts of health promotion and disease prevention, effectively communicating with families and communities, and implementing strategies that promote inclusivity. And this is also covered by a particular course on community diagnosis and community organizing. So this only highlights by mapping the competencies and the learning outcomes with the courses and topics that are highlighted in the curriculum, demonstrate that in the existing curriculum that we have here in the Philippines, the Bachelor of Science in Nursing, we have identified not only the topics and content, but primarily the competencies needed to be able to practice in primary care facilities, as well as in other levels of care, to be able to implement primary health care in the Philippines. So now let me go to the next slide that describe how do we conduct the related learning experience of students in the BSN curriculum here in the Philippines. So community immersion is very important. So and the concepts, as we apply them to hospitals, as we have seen in the previous slides, are also taught in the community setting. So from the concepts of caring for patients with alterations from oxygenation, fluid electrolytes, and so on, and dealing with patients with chronic problems, complex problems, these are also brought into the community. Students learn from actual experience in the community immersion. So we know that in several courses, they have to render a specific number of hours for related learning experience. So students not only handle patients in health centers for vaccination or nutrition counseling, but they also conduct home visits to do family and health nursing, and also community organizing activities such as mother's class or orientation sessions with village health workers or barangay health workers. So there are many venues where students are actually taught and given learning opportunities how they should function as public health nurses in the future, to be practice ready when they graduate. So whether they opt to practice in the hospital or in the public health setting. So aside from the community immersion, it's also important to discuss faculty development. So faculty development programs are essential in promoting the implementation of the universal health care in the academe, because these are opportunities for faculty to also have a reality check on how concepts are actually be taught, and also how are they going to be useful for students when they eventually graduate and practice in hospital or in the public health setting. So in the University of the Philippines, so we do conduct several continuing education programs where we involve faculty members from other institutions to have their own learning opportunities. So for example, we conduct training like designing flexible in learning and nursing, looking at how we design courses, and either formal courses or non-formal courses, to be able to use teaching and learning innovations, and also pedagogical innovations like use of blended learning in designing these programs. We're also conducting leadership development courses for public health nurses and midwives, so emphasizing the need for reorienting care, not only to primary health care, but understanding the health system So these courses, the two leadership development courses sponsored by the Department of Health, actually reorients also nurses and midwives to how we should approach the provision of care using the lens of the health system's building blocks. So it's not only delivering the programs, health service delivery, but also understanding the challenges that we have in terms of human resources, in terms of information systems, in terms of governance, in terms of financing. And these programs are also important for faculty members to understand how we can also help in having our undergraduate students be mindful of these challenges that we have in the reality in public health settings, so that they are also aware how we can help not only the health workers themselves, but also the clients that we have in the community. Another program that we run at the University of the Philippines is the Nurse Lead program that's funded by the Johnson & Johnson Global Community Impact. This program actually trains public health nurses on advanced practice in public health nursing, and it highlights identification of issues and concerns of public health nurses in their specific local areas, and proposing solutions on how these can be addressed through leadership, management, and collaboration. And since 2021, we have already graduated 400 public health nurses from this program. And we've seen an amount of projects that innovations that our public health nurses are implementing in their local areas. And this year, we're starting a new program, which is the Nurse Lead Teaching Public Health Nurses. Teaching public health nursing. So this is for the educators to learn from each other on how we can actually teach more effectively public health nursing concepts. So in our curriculum, it's very much emphasized that what we're doing is actually authentic learning, that it's not only the lectures, but it's actually the provision of teaching learning opportunities where students will have an appreciation of the concepts that they are learning. And this is very important in designing the related learning experiences of our students. For example, in the University of the Philippines, we do have community immersion for 2 months for fourth-year students to be deployed in rural areas, to live with foster families, to be able to have a meaningful interaction with the barangay health workers, as well as other leaders in the community. We usually assign 2 students per barangay. So I'm sure other universities are also doing similar innovations in terms of ensuring that students have enough or ample learning opportunities with the community in about public health. So all the public health functions will also be addressed and also be part of the learning competencies that they will have during the exposure or during the community immersion. Aside from the faculty development, research and publication are also important. So we have in recent years, we have the University of the Philippines also collaborated on several studies to be able to look into, one, the advanced roles of nurses, not only in the clinical setting, but also in the public health setting. Needs assessment on the capacities of primary healthcare providers in selected municipalities in the province of Cavite. So this one, the Cavite is actually our area, our rural health area for the community immersion of our fourth-year students. And we also did a study on improving community health workers' attitudes towards collaborative practice in the care of older adults. And other studies that have been important in terms of widening the knowledge and also the skills, and also the faculty development as part of the faculty development programs, are the conduct of this following research and publication. So in 2017, we did a formative evaluation of e-health in the Philippines. So there's, as we know, health information system is one of the building blocks of the health system. And there are many challenges that we're facing in the implementation of e-health in the country, among which, of course, is internet connection, as well as the information systems as well. That there are so many e-health solutions in the Philippines, but what should be the common language for these information systems to be able to talk to each other? So these are some of the challenges that we have, especially in ensuring that there's a smooth referral system in the healthcare provider network. And determining the required skill mix to deliver primary healthcare services across various rural and urban communities in the Philippines. So we also had this study in 2018. So again, there are recommendations from the World Health Organization in terms of what should be the ratio of the healthcare workers across populations. And we have seen that even though we have many nurses, we still lack actually numbers in terms of the nurse-patient ratio, not only in hospital but also in community settings. The third is primary healthcare capacities and needs of healthcare providers. Again, looking at how, even though the primary healthcare concepts are already integrated in the curriculum, there's still a need to look into continuing professional programs for healthcare workers. And these were actually seen in this particular study. And competencies and training needs of public health nurses was also conducted prior to the development of the Nurse Lead program, highlighting the need to focus also concepts like leadership, management, and collaboration in the competencies for public health. And the last two, the promoting resilience and retention of healthcare workers in the Philippines. So we also looked into this particular issue, wherein what we have seen is that in terms of nurses retention here in the Philippines, we actually have more nurses staying in public health compared to nurses staying in hospitals. So on average, you'll have public health nurses stay in their places of work from 8 to 10 years, whereas in hospitals, we've seen that you have a much lower retention or number of years average of stay. And we're also finishing a study on validation of the required skill mix for primary healthcare services. So we're using the WHO working index for staffing. And again, even though we say that we have enough graduates of nursing, we still actually don't have the ideal skill mix for health workforce in public health. So what are the other movements or issues that we want to push to be able to implement universal health care? So in those studies that I've cited previously, one of the areas that we have seen is really a need to advance public health nursing. And we have also observed and we have documented there are actually many public health nurses who stay. And unfortunately, even though the nurse deployment program that was conceived in 2014 as RN Hills and then later on became nurse deployment program, this was actually the way of the national government to augment public health nurses in in the local government units, especially in municipalities with that are low resource. Unfortunately, it's now 10 years, 12 years. Until now, they're actually still on contractual hiring. It's meaning to say they're not given permanent positions. And this is actually a challenge for many of these public health nurses who are just hired for one year, and then they will have to wait whether they're going to be hired again or they're going to be transferred to another post. And it's actually a challenge not only for the nurses but also for the system, since they are not seen as permanent personnel, and many of the task shifting is actually happening because of the non-permanency of these public health nurses. So this brings me to this topic on core competencies for public health professionals. So since we are seeing that more and more nurses are staying in public health, and one of the reasons also is that with the Magna Carta for public health workers, there is a guaranteed minimum salary wage in public health compared to private sector. And this is also one of the reasons why, aside from, of course, many nurses who stay in public health usually stay with their origin. So if they're from the north, they are usually deployed in the same region. So it was easier for them. But with this trend of having more public health nursing, we hope that we can actually advance public health nursing, and we're looking at the core competencies for public health professionals. So this one was actually a council on linkages between academia and public health practice. And this composed of several competency statements that we looked into, and many of these domains were actually reflected in the Nurse Lead program that we ran since 2021, and also emphasizes the building blocks of the health system, from health service delivery to health financing, health regulation, health governance, human resources for health, and health information system. So we think that with the advanced practice nursing, so we'll be able to push for not only the universal healthcare implementation, but also the Philippine Qualification Framework, especially Level 7, the Philippine Nursing Bill, and the National Nursing Career Progression Program. So these are the policies that would also push for advanced practice nursing. So at the moment, there's a draft policy standards guidelines for the Master of Science in Nursing professional track. And this one is the educational preparation for nurses to be able to practice as advanced public health nurses. And that would actually help implement universal healthcare, especially in areas where there are also no doctors. There are already documented local governments or municipalities where there are no doctors. Nurses are the ones running the healthcare service delivery, or at least the health services. And we are seeing more and more opportunities for advanced practice, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. And so we're pushing this agenda that from the academic's perspective, while we wait for the passing of the National Nursing Bill that we've been waiting for since 2016, that when that bill that already includes the provision on the advanced practice as a scope of practice in the Philippines, then we're ready with the educational preparation, that we already have trained nurses who are ready to be credentialed by the Board of Nursing, by the PRC, for them to be registered advanced practitioners. And it's not only the nursing bill, the National Nursing Career Progression Program is also another, with a career and specialization program also of the Professional Regulation Commission. There's also that provision that that nurses can also do advanced practice here in the Philippines. So we're waiting for all these policies to be in place so that we can put more a strength in the contribution of nurses in the implementation of the universal health care. So this is actually my last slide. So moving forward, so in summary, we have seen a need for capacity building programs and activities for faculty teaching public health. So it's not only the lectures or the content, the emphasis on primary health care, in primary care, in inclusion in the professional courses, but also ensuring that we are able to provide teaching learning opportunities in the related learning experience, that we give authentic learning opportunities for our students. And another is the development of enhanced instructional designs, clinical teaching plans, and authentic assessment tools. So clinical teaching plans also include, of course, the community or the field practicum. So again, there are many challenges, especially in institutions or schools where they have a very large population, to be able to ensure that they have partnerships with communities that will allow them not only to do primary care services in the health center, but to be able to do community immersion programs, and also group activities or targeting vulnerable groups in communities. And at the same time, designing evaluation tools that will be able to measure this, the achievement of the learning outcomes. Third, the use of simulation in innovation in teaching and learning. So we've seen an increase in the use of simulation and innovation in teaching clinics, clinical competencies, especially during and immediately after the pandemic, where hospitals were more conservative in allowing students to do procedures, or to have to allow more students in clinical settings. And many have actually maximized the teaching learning opportunities of simulations. We can also do this in public health, in teaching public health concepts. So not maybe not through the use of high fidelity mannequins, but more on the use of standard patients, and even the use of video-based materials. So, but definitely more innovations are needed in making teaching and learning activities for the kind of students that we have. Next is the expanded community field immersion programs for faculty and nursing students. So we need to realize that field immersions are not only for nursing students, but also for faculty. So there has to be programs as well for faculty development that orients them to what are the current challenges in the community and how they can facilitate learning for students. Fifth, the inclusion of primary healthcare and universal healthcare in the nursing research agenda of nursing schools. We've also seen that another way of ensuring that we're oriented to what's happening in terms of universal healthcare implementation is looking at our nursing research. And it's not about nursing research in clinics, but it's about nursing research in public health. And this is, I think, where many schools also need to improve on. So ensuring that public health concepts are also part of the nursing research agenda, and graduate programs, programs that have thesis requirements, dissertation requirements, can also include, should also include public health research. Last, research-based community extension programs with impact assessment. So we've seen many community extension programs connected with schools, but we have not seen many research around these community extension programs, especially impact assessments. And this is a lost opportunity, especially for nursing. So if we can also ensure that research is also a component of the community extension programs that we have with our partner communities, and ensuring the sustainability of these programs with impact assessments that would eventually also inform our teaching primary health care and in the implementation of universal health care. So finally, so this is the last slide. So in this picture or diagram, it's just highlight that universal healthcare is possible only if we are actually together in this. So, or I'm saying that the academe is part of the universal healthcare implementation. So it's not the business of the practitioners alone, public health nurses alone, or the public health officers or the Department of Health. The academe has a big role in terms of ensuring that our students are practice ready, that when they graduate, they can actually work in public health settings where they are needed. And hopefully we can have a stronger contribution to the implementation of primary health care and universal health care in the country by having advanced practice in the Philippines in the field of public health. So with that, I end my presentation and thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Bonito. Ladies and gentlemen, our speaker's presentation on the role of the academe in universal healthcare provided a comprehensive understanding of academia's pivotal role in advancing healthcare initiatives, specifically through developing the primary care competencies among students, guided by the course learning outcomes in community health nursing. Dr. Bonito highlighted the significance of capacity building for tackling healthcare complexities, advocating for innovative teaching methodologies as part of faculty development. And she also urged advocacy and social responsibility in addressing healthcare disparities through research and publication, community outreach, and policy initiatives toward advancing public health nursing. Okay, thank you very much. In conclusion, we sincerely thank Dr. Sheila R. Bonito for her insightful presentation. Her expertise and passion for advancing health equity inspire us all as we work toward a healthier and more equitable society. Thank you, Dr. Bonito, for your invaluable contribution to our plenary session. We are pleased to welcome back Dr. Nera A. Galan, who will guide us through the open forum for our first plenary session. Okay, Dr. Galan will now invite questions from our attendees, specifically addressing the insightful topics covered by Dr. Bonito in her presentation.
Okay, thank you once again, Dr. Bartolata. So this time, I thank you as well to the speaker, Dr. Bonito. Now this time, we have one student from BUCN. I am glad that we have an online attendees who have questions. So may I call Mr. Dio Brandon Viterbo from BUCN. Or
Good afternoon. Am I louder? Good afternoon po.
Good afternoon. So you may now pose your question, please.
So, good afternoon. I am Dio Brandon Viterbo from Bicol University College of Nursing Main Campus, Level 3 from Block C. As discussed earlier, particularly in the introduction of universal healthcare, there is an identified necessity for strengthening its implementation both within academic institutions and across the country. Additionally, there's a recognized need for reorientation toward primary healthcare within the academe. I am willing to understand the underlying reasons driving these needs. So, in your own opinion, my question would be, what are the key challenges and opportunities for implementing universal healthcare and promoting primary healthcare within academic institution and across the country? That's my question.
Okay, thank you. Very interesting question. Now, Dr. Bonito, may I request you to please answer.
Okay, thank you very much for that very good question. Actually, the challenge really is in the implementation also of our curriculum. So as we know, we follow the same curriculum nationwide. So, and this is the outcomes-based education. The learning outcomes are already there. The suggested teaching learning activities are already there. But the challenge always is looking for that setting, the community setting, where you will be able to demonstrate these learning outcomes, these course outcomes, and how can you implement the teaching learning strategies that would be optimal for the kind of students that you have and also the setting that you have. So since we have varied levels of resources, so in the provision in the CHED policy, in terms of hospital, we have a base hospital. And the base hospital is the one that we need to show where we can demonstrate our clinical competencies. But in terms of public health, we need to identify our partner community where we can actually practice, and that there lies the challenge. How do you select that community where you can really demonstrate and practice public health competencies? So that's one, the setting where you will be able to freely conduct your demonstrate your teaching learning activities and engage your students with the community. And choosing that community is very important, and sustaining that community is also very important. A partnership between the academe and the community, the local government, is very important to ensure that you can maximize the teaching learning opportunities. And another challenge is faculty development, because not all faculty that are hired by colleges or to teach us in colleges and schools of nursing actually have public health experiences. So it's very seldom that you will get faculty who will have public health background, like have they worked in a health center or have they worked in a rural health unit, etc. It's very rare. But what can be done is actually also for the faculty to have its development programs, their own community immersion programs, so that they know what are the real challenges in the community, and also to be updated. What are the programs of the Department of Health that are the priority public health issues in the country, and particularly in the setting where the students are going to be, because it's not a one size fits all. That's why community health diagnosis is very important in the beginning, and this is one of the requirements anyway of the curriculum. So any community health interventions that we conduct in a community setting has to be grounded in what are the priority public health issues as well of the community. So I would say that those two are the primary challenges. So looking for the partner communities, faculty development programs. Maybe the third is also the size of number of students. I mean, if you have too many students, how do you now ensure that they will have ample opportunities for every one of them to be deployed to have a meaningful community immersion, and the type of teaching learning activities and requirements that you will also require of them to ensure that they will have a maximum exposure to the community, for them to learn from the community. So I think I will leave it there, but there are still many other challenges, but I think these are the top three.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Bonito, for that very detailed answer. So I hope Mr. Viterbo is satisfied with that answer. So thank you. So are there anyone else from the on-site participants to ask question? Okay, in the interest of time, at least we have entertained one question. How about you there, Ma'am Chan? Do you want to ask question? Okay. So let's have one from our on-site parties or attendees from Bicol University College of Nursing, a faculty. You may use the microphone. It's in the chat box. Please, maybe the technical committee can read the question. Okay. Okay, so here's a question from Dr. Charina Sipon, the BUC and faculty. With gratitude for your comprehensive discussion on universal healthcare in the academe, what are the current and key challenges being faced by your institution in the integration of UHC or the universal healthcare, particularly in compliance with students' primary care competencies? Very interesting. Okay, Dr. Benito.
Yeah. So thank you for that question. I think in terms of my institution, the University of the Philippines, we do in terms of the setting that we have, we practice in Manila Health with the Manila Health Department for the urban exposure. And also we practice in Cavite for the rural health immersion of our students. So since we have a fairly small number of students, so we only have 70 to 80 students every year, first year students. And so we usually divide them into two when they go to the hospital and community immersion towards the last year. So the challenges that we're always faced with is actually the sustainability of the programs that we're running. So we cannot assume that the same issues that we have faced in the previous years with the previous sets of students will still be the challenges that the current sets of students will face. And actually, we ask the Manila Health Department, so where we should deploy our students. So we ask what are the priority areas, and the areas that we usually go to are really very challenging areas. At the moment, some of our students are actually in Tondo, where there was a fire recently. So I don't know if you're following the news. And so even though the plan of the course was to render the experience in a health center, we had to shift to an evacuation center where the services of nurses are needed more. And so these are some of the challenges I think that we have to be aware of. So even though you have designed your teaching learning activities with specific settings, there are also areas where you need to be flexible. You need to be able to go where you are needed. And so we had to shift our focus in how do you deliver the same and sets of learning competencies, but changing the setting. So it's no longer a health center with enough provision of medicines and there's a scheduled services every day. But this time you need to shift to an evacuation center where the expectation is the same, that you'll be able to deliver the primary care services. So I think that's just one of the challenges. So to be able to design a teaching learning experience for students that will not that's not only beneficial to the institution, the academy, but most importantly to the community where you are serving. So we are in the community not because we need them for us to learn, but also because we want really to contribute to that community. And I think that has to be highlighted, that our presence in the community should not be a burden to the community, that we are able to render true service to the community through service learning. So I don't know if that covers all, but at the moment that is what I can say, because that's fairly recent, what the challenge that we are facing in terms of changing setting. It's easier to just say, oh, we can go to another health center so that we can have a scheduled and structured teaching learning experience for students. But we decided to stay in that community where there's no community anymore because they're now in the evacuation center with a new set of challenges. So I leave it at that. And I'm seeing more questions, but I leave it to the moderator if I should answer the other questions.
Okay, indeed, a very comprehensive answer from our speaker. So thank you so much, Dr. Bonito, for that very informative answer. So that challenged us in the academia, our roles to play in advocating and implementing universal healthcare policies. Okay? So, are there any more questions from our online attendees? Okay. So if there is none, I would like to thank again our speaker for graciously answering the questions from our participants, both in online and on-site platform. Your insights have been invaluable, and we appreciate your contributions to our discussion in this session. And I would like to thank also our attendees, participants who post their questions. Thank you for your active participation. So again, I would like to encourage you that we continue our conversation even beyond this forum so that we can really collaborate each other, relating our takeaways from these two sessions that we have now. Thank you.
At this point, ladies and gentlemen, we extend our gratitude to Dr. Bonito by presenting her with a certificate of commendation for her outstanding contribution to our event. This certificate of commendation is presented to Dr. Sheila R. Bonito for her invaluable contribution as plenary speaker on the topic, the role of the academe in universal healthcare at the third International Research Conference with the theme Harmonizing Research and Health Practice, Perspectives of Bicol University and Sinayoke University, given this 18th day of April 2024 at Ninong's Hotel, Legazpi City, Albay, Philippines. Signed, Dr. Baby Boy Benjamin D. Negres III, BUSUC President 4, and Dr. Yako Halua, President and CEO, Sinayoke University. Once again, thank you very much, Dr. Bonito.
Thank you very much as well.
I am pleased to introduce a dedicated research and development expert affiliated with Sinayoke University, where he brings his expertise to the forefront of academic inquiry. Holding a Master of Health Sciences, he has demonstrated a profound commitment to the advancement of knowledge in his field. Currently, he is furthering his academic journey as a doctoral researcher at the University of Uvascular, immersing himself in cutting-edge research that promises to shape the future of healthcare. His endeavors underscore his passion for innovation and his invaluable contribution to the ever-evolving landscape of health sciences research. He will share his expertise on health literacy in the era of digitalization. His insights are well positioned to shed light on how healthcare is evolving in the digital age and highlight how important health literacy is to easing this shift. Please join me in welcoming Mika Uito.
Yeah, thank you for the kind introduction, and thank you for allowing me to speak to you today on the topic of health literacy. I will just first share our slides. So thank you very much. As mentioned, my name is Mika Uitto, and I work in Seinäjoki University of Applied Sciences as a research and development expert. And the title of my presentation today is Health Literacy in the Era of Digitalization. And my aim is to introduce you to the concept of health literacy and explain why it's relevant right now today in our era of digitalization. I will start the presentation by giving you some context on the status of social and healthcare digitalization in Finland, and then we will move on to the main concept, health literacy. First of all, as we all know, health services and the supply of health information and services have shifted towards digital environments. And this is especially the case here in Finland. Of course, worldwide, we have new information sources online, for example, through internet, social media, videos and blogs and podcasts. But also we have new kinds of health services from the digital sources. This could include, for example, remote consultations, but also we have new self-management tools, for example, through mobile apps or devices and wearables. And this increasing of digital services in social and healthcare has been seen as one of the key challenges in solving some of our main problems with the current Finnish social and healthcare system. Our biggest challenges include aging populations and the need for new cost-efficient services. We are also a country of long distances, and we have a lacking social and healthcare workforce. So this has been seen as one key aim of our current and prior governments on social and healthcare, the increasing of digital services. And a quote from the current government program states that in Finland, the share of e-services will be increased and digital services will be made the primary option for those whom it is viable. And according to European statistics, Finland has the highest share of people using the internet for health-related activities. As an example, 81% of the people use internet to seek health information, and 79% use it to access personal health records online. We also have one of the best internet availabilities, access in households in internet. So all this could imply that Finland is already a quite potential country for the digitalization of the social and healthcare services. But let's go a little bit further into the statistics on this matter. First of all, we know that from the total population, 18% of Finns need assistance or guidance when using digital social and healthcare services. But what's perhaps even more interesting than the total number is the gradual increasement of the percentage based on the age of the population. So very rarely the younger populations need help with these services, but the older the population gets, the more assistance they need. So to move on to the main concept of the presentation, for citizens to be able to find reliable information and to use these health services efficiently, sufficient levels of health literacy are needed. But first of all, what is health literacy? Well, it can be defined in many ways, but the World Health Organization defines it as personal knowledge and competences that enable people to access, understand, and use information and services in ways that promote good health and well-being. Health literacy can be seen as like an umbrella term that covers many other subcategories of health literacy, which could include, for example, vaccination literacy, food or nutrition literacy, mental health literacy, digital health literacy, and medication literacy, among others. And if I had to highlight one of these, it would for sure be digital health literacy, not only because it's the aim of the topic of my PhD, but of course in the era of digitalization where we have to possess certain amount of skills to use these digital services and to find and apply this digital information. And of course, the COVID-19 pandemic highlighted this very well. But why is health literacy important for an individual? Well, health literate individuals, for example, they are able to seek and evaluate health information, implement good self-care of diseases, implement health-promoting lifestyle changes, for example, in nutrition or physical activity, overall making informed health and well-being choices, knowing when and how to seek healthcare services, and also in sharing health-promoting actions and information with others and participating in solving health problems in the community or the society. We also know that health literacy is a health determinant. This means that low health literacy is associated with unhealthy lifestyle choices, poor self-management of diseases, poor skills in understanding health communication, and increased risk of hospitalization, and also higher risk of chronic disease. From the large population studies, we also know that there's few factors that are especially associated with low health literacy among populations. And these are low socioeconomic status, for example, low education or low financial status. Immigrant backgrounds are also associated, and high age. And therefore, it could be said that those groups that are affected by low or poor health literacy are some of the already disadvantaged populations in our society from a health promotion perspective. And therefore, to decrease these inequalities in health and health literacy, perhaps these are some of the groups that should be targeted. But thus far, we have also only talked about health literacy from an individual's perspective. But we do know that it is very much also related to the accessibility and information and services that the healthcare organizations and systems provide. This means that the sufficiency of an individual's health literacy levels are very context dependent. They depend much on the environment in which the person looks for information and uses services. So it's not just about the individual's abilities. As our example states, if a website or a service is accessible, easy to understand, uses clear language, even lower levels of health literacy may be sufficient. To conclude this perspective, the ideal scenario regarding health literacy is achieved when the individual's health literacy levels and the demands of the healthcare systems match as well as possible. So it's crucial to take both of these perspectives into account always when discussing health literacy. But now we know that what is health literacy. We also know that citizens are required to have some skills, but the organizations are required to provide support and accessibility. But what can the healthcare professionals do to address health literacy? Well, we approached this question with a study in which we conducted focus group interviews and individual expert interviews among professionals in the context of people with memory disorders and their caregivers. And here are some of our highlights from the study on how the professionals can address health literacy and support people with low health literacy. Well, first of all, use clear language communication. This means avoiding like extra medical jargon or difficult medical words when you provide information for the patient. Secondly, prioritizing and limiting the amount of information shared at once, because people are, of course, interested in getting information and increasing understanding of their situation, but they may not be able to absorb every piece of information that is shared to them at once. So prioritizing is the key. Thirdly, guiding through the shared information. So in addition to just transferring information from the professional to the patient, you should also guide through the information, for example, in how the patient or individual can apply this information in his or her everyday life situations to promote their health. And lastly, ensuring the understanding of the information. You can, for example, use methods like TeachBack to ensure that the crucial information that you have provided the patient, that it has been understood correctly, and to avoid any extra misunderstandings that may end up being quite dangerous. All in all, to conclude this presentation of health literacy, we can say that health literacy means the ability of an individual to use health-related information and services in health-promoting ways. We also know that low health literacy is associated with poor lifestyle choices and poor health. The citizens are required to have some skills, but the organizations are required to provide accessibility, support, and of course also alternatives for those citizens who are unable to, for example, use the digital alternatives. And lastly, the healthcare professionals can take individuals' health literacy and individual needs into account when providing care. For now, I would like to thank you, and I believe we have a discussion or questions session coming up.
Unfortunately, we can't hear you here from Finland, but I assume that it's my turn now. So health literacy is a development, and its development is an important part of the present and future for us all. Digitalization is moving forward at a rapid pace, and healthcare is constantly evolving. As we heard in Mika Uitto's presentation, health literacy is a multidimensional skill, and supporting it is important from an individual, professional, and organizational perspective. On behalf of Seinäjoki University of Applied Sciences, I will now start the open forum section, and I ask anyone who has questions on the topic to put them on chat section or raise hand here on site. So it seems that we have a question in here in Finland. So please share your question.
Thank you. At first, I would like to thank Mr. Uitto. It was an informative and knowledgeable presentation. My name is Saana Perkiö. I'm a second-year student here in Seinäjoki University of Applied Sciences, getting my bachelor degree in nursing. My question to you is that how does Finnish school education system include health literacy due to one aspect or one part of the studies?
That's actually a great question. One of our best practices from Finland in regards to health literacy is the fact that health literacy has been integrated to our education system all the way from the elementary school to high school and further. So health literacy is included in our subject of studies called health education. And all the way from the elementary school, the students are taught like critical reading skills on health related matters and skills like that. In addition, health literacy is in some level noted in university curricula, not directly, but as a cross-cutting theme. For example, here in Seinäjoki University, it is included in like communication related studies or evidence-based care or just generally critical thinking and reading. Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any other questions online maybe? We have one here on site. There's nothing in chat, so I assume that we can take this one from here. Okay. Thank you for the presentation. It was quite informative. My name is Rona Namakula from the Bachelor's Nursing Degree Program from SAMC. It's been discussed in your slides about how health literacy as a health determinant, and some of the factors associated with health literacy are low socioeconomic status, immigrant background, and high age. So my question to you is, how has the issue of low health literacy amongst people with immigrant backgrounds been incorporated in the healthcare system, in the education system of Finland? Yeah, that's my question.
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's not an easy one to answer. First of all, health literacy is linked to many other literacies. For example, general literacy or media literacy or digital literacy. So when discussing like people with immigrant backgrounds, it's quite difficult to only focus on improving their health literacy because it's about so many other skills as well. But I believe we have programs for the people with immigrant backgrounds, how they can integrate into our social and healthcare systems, how they can learn the language as well as possible to be able to use these services, and other factors. But actually, health literacy among immigrant background people in Finland is it hasn't been studied that much yet, but that's for sure one further topic of research.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Franz.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for this question. And I see we have one question here on chat. So how does your country address false information posted in social platforms?
Yeah, that's a good question, how our country addresses that. Well, first of all, we cannot censor all the information that is available on the internet or in social networks, but we do have campaigns, for example, on like reliable health information, of course, and we have quite a few like national health information websites that are like dependent, and they are very like reliable in their content, and they're updated constantly as like new research comes up. So yeah, to answer the question, we cannot really, it is difficult to control the information that is available on like online sources, but we can counter that with reliable information sources and national.
Okay, thank you for this answer. Do we have another questions? Okay, we have one. So in your country, is there an evidence from which among the other subcategories that covers health literacy has the highest accessed services, from vaccination to medication literacies?
Well, actually, in Finland, we don't yet have research on pretty much any of the subcategories. So we don't have research on, for example, vaccination literacy or medication literacy, but we will have research on digital health literacy in a few years after the PhD is completed. So stay tuned for that.
Okay, thank you. Do we have another questions here on site or online? Seems not. So I want to thank you for all your questions, and also a very special thanks to Mika Uitto for sharing his expertise at this International Cooperation Conference. And I'm sure we will all learn a lot from this presentation. And I will now hand the podium over to Piccolo University. Thank you.
And that concludes our second plenary session. Thank you to our moderator, Raila Karna, and to our second plenary speaker, Mika Uitto, from Sinayoki University. Now, as we wrap up the first day of our third international conference on the theme Harmonizing Research and Health Practice, Perspectives to Bicol University and Sinayoki University, I am glad to welcome back for the third time Dr. Nera A. Galan to offer a synthesis of today's sessions and share a few key takeaways Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Nera A. Galan.
Thank you. Okay, finally. The day one of the third International Research Conference. Theme: Harmonizing Research and Health Practice, Perspectives of Bicol University and Seneoki University. Commenced with ceremonial presentations symbolizing unity and cultural diversity. The entrance of colors from the Philippines and Finland, the doxology and national anthems set a collaborative tone emphasizing the significance of international cooperation in research and healthcare. Welcome addresses by Dr. Baby Boy Benjamin D. Nebres III, President of Bicol University, and Yato, President and CEO of Seneoki University, underscored the importance of interdisciplinary approaches and global collaboration in addressing healthcare challenges. Dr. Alma Banwa provided an overview of the conference's objectives, highlighting the need for harmonizing research and healthcare practices. Senia C. Clemenya and Terry Ala introduced participants from both universities, emphasizing the diversity of perspectives brought to the conference. The keynote address by Dr. Jesus Casida explored the theme of harmonizing research and health practice, emphasizing the pivotal role of academia in shaping healthcare policies and practices. Dr. Casida's speech inspired attendees to consider innovative approaches to bridging the gap between research and practice. Plenary sessions further delved into relevant topics. Dr. Sheila Bonito's plenary session focused on the pivotal role of academia in the realm of universal healthcare. Drawing on her extensive experience as Dean of the UP College of Nursing, Dr. Bonito provided valuable insights into how academic institutions can contribute to shaping health inform evidence-based healthcare interventions and policies. Dr. Bonito highlighted the need for collaboration between academia and healthcare practitioners. Also, the policymakers and other stakeholders to address healthcare systems worldwide complex challenges. Her speech inspired attendees to recognize the power of academia in driving positive change and improving healthcare outcomes for all. Mika Yuto's plenary session centered on the critical topic of health literacy in the digital era. As a senior lecturer of Seneoki University, he brought expertise in health, communication, and digital health technologies in the forefront of the discussion. He explored how advancements in technology are reshaping how people access, understand, and utilize health information. Mika discussed the challenges and opportunities presented by the digitalization of healthcare, including issues related to information overload, misinformation, and digital inequalities. He highlighted innovative strategies for promoting health literacy in the digital age, such as leveraging digital health education and communication platforms. The plenary session sparked meaningful discussions on the importance of equipping individuals with the skills and knowledge needed to navigate the complexities of modern healthcare systems effectively. So with that synthesis of the topics for today's first day of the third international conference, I know that all of us are now inspired and enlightened everything that we learned from here. Now, the sessions were moderated by yours truly and Raila Karna, facilitated engaging discussions and highlighted the importance of collaboration and innovation in advancing research and healthcare. So overall, Day 1 set a dynamic and collaborative tone for the conference, paving the way for fruitful discussions and insights into the intersection of research and healthcare practices. So congratulations everyone for the fruitful and very productive Day 1 of this international conference.
Now, before we conclude day 1 of the 3rd International Conference, we invite you to capture some memorable photos. So I kindly invite you to gather near the conference backdrop of stage. We have our professional photographers to capture group photos and individual shots to commemorate this special occasion. Please join us in capturing these moments of camaraderie and collaboration as we document the success of day 1 of our conference. Okay, let's go. Thank you for your participation, and we look forward to seeing you again tomorrow for another day of insightful discussions and fruitful exchanges. As we draw the curtains of day 1 of the 3rd International Conference, I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to each and every one of you for your active participation, insightful contributions, and engaging discussion throughout the day. Before we adjourn, we have a special treat in store for you. We will be showcasing promotional videos highlighting the distinguished achievements, academic excellence, and vibrant campus life of both Bicol University and Sinayogi University. These videos offer a glimpse into each university's rich history, innovative research, and diverse opportunities. So please direct your attention to the screens as we embark on this virtual journey to discover our partner institutions' unique attributes and strengths.
Bicol University, or BU, the premier university in the Bicol region, Philippines, is a SUP Level 4 institution by Department of Budget and Management, or DBM standards, established on June 21, 1969, following the passage of Republic Act 5521. It has 17 colleges spread across its 7 campuses, in the provinces of Albay and Sorsogon, with the College of Law and the College of Medicine as its latest addition, and recently the Doctor of Dental Medicine and Doctor of Veterinary Medicine. As of latest count, Bicol University has 82 AACUP accredited academic programs, with 3 programs accredited at level 4. It is also a level 3 accredited institution whose reputation as the premier university in the Bicol region is rooted in its consistent top-level performance in various licensure examinations, becoming recognized as top-performing school in accountancy, social work, midwifery, nursing, education, and engineering. BU has been given its seal of excellence as CHED recognized Center of Excellence in Teacher Education, Center of Development in Nursing Education, Center of Development in Fisheries Education, and Center for Higher Education Research. Its commitment toward national thrust and directions and in meeting the needs of its community beyond the university borders is reflected in its programs and projects as base agency for Bicol Consortium for Health Research and Development, or BCHRD, and base agency for Bicol Consortium for Agriculture, Aquatic, and Natural Resource Research and Development, or BCARD. Over the years, it has earned its place as one of the 22 leading state universities in the Philippines. Bicol University has also been recently rated as 3-star institution by the Quacquarelli Simmons, or QS Intelligence Unit, the independent compiler of QS World University Rankings. Bicol University has expanded its linkages to Europe and Southeast Asian universities. This is Bicol University.
Recording stopped.